In 2003, TMS Entertainment partnered with Sega and Sonic Team to create an animated series based on the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, called Sonic X. The show follows Sonic and his friends as they're transported to another world by the Chaos Emeralds, where they meet a 12-year-old boy named Chris Thorndyke and his family. Over time, they learn that Dr. Eggman also appeared in this world, along with Sonic's allies and enemies alike, leading to both comedic hijinks and serious stakes. In my youth, this show introduced me to the Sonic franchise, and for the longest time, I only watched parts of the series dubbed with the changes made by 4Kids Entertainment. For years, that's how the story of Sonic X ended for me. Until now. One day, I decided to pick the series back up and watch it in its entirety. And I made sure to watch it in the best possible way, subtitled, without any of the cuts or alterations made by 4Kids. And let me tell you, this show is all over the place. So strap in as we attempt to answer the question, is Sonic X still good? This show is 78 episodes long and is divided into 8 sagas, which I'll be ranking on a scale from E being the worst to S being the best. I'll also be providing a small synopsis of each saga along with a favorite episode from it, concluding on thoughts on the specific episode and the saga as a whole. And before we go any further, I want to thank both the Sonic Wiki Zone and Archive.org for being amazing sources for both further explaining the stories of the show and for allowing me to watch the show this way at all. And obviously, massive spoilers for the entirety of the Sonic X series. So if you want to watch that yourself, go do that and then come back here. Trust me, it'll be worth it. So, with that being said, let's go! The series begins with an action scene of Sonic breaking into Eggman's fortress, where he has Cream the Rabbit and Cheese the Chow held in captivity with the 7 Chaos Emeralds. After a misfire by one of Eggman's robots, Sonic, his friends, Eggman, and his army of robots are all transported to another world by Chaos Control. In this new world, after a little exploring, Sonic is saved from drowning in a pool by a boy named Chris Thorndyke, and over time, all of Sonic's friends find their way towards each other at the Thorndyke Mansion, making the place their new home in this world. Sonic's gang mostly tries to stay hidden from the citizens of Station Square, while Eggman is front and center trying to take over the world to fuel his empire. Through their adventures in this saga, they find that the Chaos Emeralds worked with them, and thus starts a chase to collect all 7 before Eggman and his gaggle of robotic goons get them first. As Sonic and his pals defeat Eggman time and time again, the public starts slowly accepting them into society and praising them for their heroism. Favorite episode? Episode 10, Unfair Ball / Fierce Fight, Sonic Baseball Team. The episode starts with Tails finding a Chaos Emerald in the middle of a baseball field, and after that, the entire episode consists of Sonic and his friends fighting against Eggman and his robots in a game of baseball for said emerald. It's so ridiculously funny to me seeing all these characters with superhuman abilities and intellects just playing baseball. The funniest part is that there's a specific part of the episode where Tails is given a strike when he didn't swing the bat and the ball isn't in the strike zone for him, making the call a strike when it should have been a ball. Jeez, I hope someone got fired for that blunder. To me, this saga is pretty good at introducing the audience to both the Sonic characters and the new human characters exclusive to the show. I have no real problems with this saga since they're just getting the ball rolling to start bigger things and getting all the characters together and whatnot. And all the human characters are surprisingly fun in the series so far, which is something that can't be said about most of the times humans have been in the Sonic franchise. The only one I'm still on the fence about a little is Chris himself. But that's not because of anything in this saga. For now, he's just inoffensive. Sonic and his friends being able to be in public more frequently, they decide to travel around while Dr. Eggman secretly builds a flying fortress called the Egg Fort. This battleship is short-lived, as it gets damaged by encounters with Sonic's posse, leading to the creation of the Egg Fort 2. During their journeys in this saga, the heroes gather 5 of the Chaos Emeralds, but Eggman manages to steal one. Desperate to get the last emerald and return to Sonic's home planet, Knuckles and Chris mistakenly give their collected emeralds to Eggman. The Doctor uses them to power the E99 Eggsterminator to defeat Sonic. However, Chris recovers the emeralds and gives them to Sonic, who transforms into Super Sonic for the first time in the series to defeat Eggman. The use of all 7 emeralds triggers Chaos Control, which instead of sending Sonic and his friends back home, assimilates parts of their planet, such as Angel Island, onto Earth. Favorite episode is episode 14. That's what Friends Are For / Chase the Hero Sonic. In this episode, the President's advisor, Jerome Wise, suggests celebrating Eggman's recent defeat by inviting Sonic and his friends to the White House for a party. However, this party is actually a cover-up designed to make the President look good in the upcoming election. Chris and the others tell Sonic he's invited, but he declines the invitation because he has something more important to do at that time. Spending time with one of Chris's classmates, Helen. Sonic met Helen when, during his run, he saw her wheelchair stuck in the mud. He helped her out, and she explained that she'd always wanted to visit an island with beautiful flowers with her dad, Doug. Unfortunately, Doug is constantly working to support her, so he never has the time to take her. Seeing how Helen is unable to go herself, Sonic promises to take her there on the same day as the party, so he declines the invitation to fulfill his promise to Helen. Jerome, worried that Sonic will be a no-show, sends military personnel to chase him down and bring him to the party for good publicity pictures. The rest of the episode features Sonic and Helen evading the government in a high-speed chase, culminating in a view of the very flowers Helen has wanted to see for so long. Sonic suggests picking one of the flowers for her to take with her, but she declines, saying that she'd rather leave the flower field how it is for whenever she and her dad take a trip there. Eventually, both Sonic and Helen make it to the party, where the media is too drunk to capture any good shots of Sonic and the President, thwarting Jerome's plan. The episode ends with Helen and her family having dinner and recounting her eventful day. Helen's mom, although missing dinner, is touched by how excited Helen is about her adventure, leading the parents to decide to cut back on work and spend more time with Helen as Sonic watches in the distance. This episode, to me, shows Sonic's character of doing whatever he wants at its best. While watching this for the first time, I just constantly thought, wow, that is just such a Sonic thing to do. Such a heartwarming and just feel-good episode. I suggest, even if you don't want to watch all of Sonic X, you should watch this episode in particular. It is just a good episode, man. Now that the main characters and everything are established, this saga has some really good episodes and moments, especially the episode I just talked about earlier. The writing in this arc has been upgraded since the first, giving me some funny moments where I caught myself legitimately laughing at some of them. Honorable mention goes out to episode 20, Cruise Blue / Departure Egg Fort 2, for being the funniest episode in honestly the entire series. There were even moments in this saga where the comedy was dropped for a little bit to give some genuinely heartfelt moments and scenes, which to me, is where Sonic X shines the brightest. It makes you legitimately care about the characters and emotions they're feeling, especially Chris, having to accept that Sonic will one day have to go back home. So overall, this saga is a really good one for the show, giving us a taste of what could happen if the team working on the show consistently wanted no filler, but alas, there is, and a lot of it is very forgettable. This saga is an adaptation of Sonic Adventure, picking right up where the game starts and 6 months after the events of the last saga. Eggman discovers Chaos, the god of destruction, is sealed within the Master Emerl. Eggman breaks the Emerald, releasing him to run amok and gather the Chaos Emeralds to build Eggman Land. As Sonic and his friends gather the emeralds to stop Chaos, Knuckles uncovers the history of his Echidna tribe on Angel Island while searching for the shattered pieces of the Master Emerald. Chaos eventually betrays Eggman, seeking the 7 Chaos Emeralds for itself, and flooding Station Square in its perfect Chaos form. Tikal appears to prevent Chaos from destroying the world as they did with the Echidna tribe, but Sonic says that sealing him away won't fix the problem. You have to change his heart and what he feels. With this being said, Sonic uses the positive energy of the Chaos Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic to defeat Perfect Chaos. With the help of the Chow, Chaos is sealed back in the Master Emerald by Tikal, and Station Square is left to rebuild. Favorite episode? Episode 32, Flood Fight / The Scream of Perfect Chaos. This episode consists of the final act of the Sonic Adventure story, in which Chaos betrays Eggman and obtains the final Chaos Emerald to become Perfect Chaos. Out of nowhere, Perfect Chaos begins attacking the city of Station Square as all the humans evacuate and get to safer areas while Sonic and his friends gather at the city. Eggman tries to get his revenge by using the Egg Carrier 2, but it's quickly dealt with. A shining light reveals Tikal has been following their journey and explains that Chaos needs to be sealed away in the Master Emerald again. Sonic quickly retorts, saying that if he's sealed in the Emerald again, nothing will change in his heart. He'll still be filled with anger and seek destruction. With that thought, Amy, Tails, Knuckles, and everyone else that's been tagging along for this adventure brings Sonic the Chaos Emeralds, which seem to have no power left. They still have the positive Chaos energy within them, giving Sonic the ability to transform into Super Sonic. With his newfound power, Sonic battles the gigantic monster until he can calm his heart and come to his senses with help from Tikal and the Chow. Tikal and Chaos fade into the afterlife, and finally, their souls are at peace. The day is saved thanks to Sonic and Company. Honestly, I only really like this episode because it's the most similar feeling to the game's story. The Super Sonic and Perfect Chaos fight is flashy and fun to watch. I just wish they at least used the instrumental to open your heart, since that's what made the fight so iconic to begin with, in my opinion. But overall, it was a good conclusion to the saga. While I appreciate the attempt to retell the game's story through the anime, this condensed version doesn't do the game justice. The saga is only 6 episodes long. That's way too short of a time frame to tell a story that, originally, was around 9 hours long to see fully, as opposed to barely 2 in this show. And because this saga was so rushed, a lot of the emotion and stakes from the original game just feel weightless here. Character arcs like Tails gaining his confidence are either rushed, come out of nowhere, or flat out just don't get resolved, which is such a shame. I will say though, I do like how Chaos is animated with the water effects, and even his expressions as Perfect Chaos look delightfully sinister. But when it comes down to it, this is just a watered down version of a much better story. I also wish they used some of the game's actual music. It really would have amped up many of the moments in this saga. Not by a lot, but just a little. Similar to the Chaos Saga, this saga is an adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2, picking up right after Eggman's latest defeat. Eggman uncovers his grandfather Gerald Robotnik's work on Project Shadow and awakens Shadow the Hedgehog, the ultimate life form. After his release, Shadow goes and causes all kinds of chaos in the name of revenge for his fallen friend Maria. Mistaken for Shadow, Sonic is pursued by authorities and taken to Prison Island. Shadow reveals a weapon, the Eclipse Cannon, which requires the Chaos Emeralds to be fired. The trio of Shadow, Eggman, and Rouge collect 6 Chaos Emeralds, and Eggman demonstrates the Eclipse Cannon's power by blowing up half the moon. Sonic and his friends head up to Space Colony Arc to stop them. Eggman steals the 7th Chaos Emerald to fully power the Eclipse Cannon, triggering Gerald's plan to crash the Arc into the Earth. Sonic, his friends, and Eggman unite to stop this catastrophe. Shadow hesitates, but is convinced by Chris to help. Knuckles uses the Master Emerald while Shadow fights the Bio Lizard, a prototype of the ultimate life form, to neutralize the Chaos Emerald's power. But that isn't where the Doomsday ends. The Bio Lizard merged with the Ark, determined to keep it on its collision course. Sonic and Shadow use the Emeralds to transform into Super Sonic and Super Shadow to defeat the Bio Lizard, now called the Final Lizard, and redirect the Ark back into its normal orbit. Despite saving the world, Shadow sacrifices his life, and he is remembered as a hero. Favorite episode? Episode 38. Showdown in Space / Maria's Wish. Everyone's wish. The episode picks up after the last Chaos Emerald is inserted into the Eclipse cannon. Professor Gerald Robotnik takes over all telecommunications to relay the message that his final revenge had begun. The space colony Ark would plummet down to the Earth with a devastating force, and make everyone feel just as he felt when he lost his granddaughter Maria. As the Doomsday Clock ticks, Eggman is forced to work with the heroes to shut down the Ark and neutralize the Chaos Emeralds using the Master Emerald. While this is happening, Chris attempts to convince Shadow to help them out, claiming that while there is bad in the world, Shadow should give all the people on the world down below a chance to be happy and live their lives in peace. This causes Shadow to remember Maria's true words, to make friends and to protect the planet she's always wanted to see for herself. These words drive Shadow to tears as he goes to help the heroes out. With 10 minutes remaining, Sonic, Knuckles, Deco, and Boku make their way to the cannon's core and are stopped by the Bio Lizard. Shadow arrives to help them, offering to distract the beast while they neutralize the emeralds. With the Master Emerald in place, Knuckles recites the chant that he learned from Tikal and deactivates the Chaos Emeralds. This, however, doesn't stop the collision, as the Bio Lizard merges with the Eclipse Cannon to become the Final Lizard. Then, Sonic and Shadow use the Chaos Emeralds to transform into their super forms and beat the monster. In the end, the Ark was still on its collision course and the two Super Hogs attempted to slow it down. Shadow then hears Maria cheering him on along with everyone else, making him take off his limiter rings for the first time to induct chaos control with Sonic on the Ark, bringing it back into orbit. This, unfortunately, leads to Shadow's supposed demise, as the heroes and villains alike reminisce about Shadow and the journey they've been through. The episode ends with everyone leaving the Ark, with Sonic saying, "Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog." I know it's a little unfair to keep saying that the climax of each saga is my favorite part, but it's just so good here. The stakes and emotions are high. Live and Learn plays whenever the climax of the fight with the Final Lizard happens. This episode makes me feel similarly to how I felt whenever I played Sonic Adventure 2. My only complaint is that they gave Amy's moment with Shadow from the game to Chris, which makes me think, man, because of that, why is Amy even here, besides breaking Sonic out of prison? And funny enough, besides that, a lot of this episode is very faithful to the source material. While the saga is an improvement upon how it adapted the game's story, it still messes up in quite a few spots. Weird changes like the Amy and Shadow moment being changed to have Chris be the one to convince Shadow, the random and unexplained lore drop of Eggman being from the human world, humans just thinking they own the Chaos Emeralds for whatever reason, and the same unexplained things from the game like why Professor Gerald still has his computer and such in his prison cell, make the story just more confusing. And the worst part to me is whenever Sonic encounters Shadow for the first time, Chuck and Chris don't even attempt to clear Sonic's name despite seeing Shadow right in front of them. In the game it made sense. There was no witnesses to clear Sonic's name, but here, no, there's no excuse. I appreciate the attempt at streamlining the viewing process of these long stories, but without the length of properly established characters, motivations, arcs, and more, everything just feels weightless to the viewer. But to me, honestly, the highs of this saga are definitely higher than any other one before this. The pacing's a lot better than the Chaos Saga. Some of the other changes made to the story make some plot points hit a lot harder than they did in the games. And again, when the writing gets good, it gets good. Things like Shadow's backstory being more fleshed out, soldier responsible for Maria's death having PTSD about the raid on the Ark, and the end of the saga leaving Shadow's fate truly ambiguous unlike the games, led to this portion of the show, while flawed, being the highest point of the show for me up to this point. Kinda similar to the game it's based on, huh? Chaos Control being used once more during the events of the last saga, even more of Sonic's world gets transported to Earth, including Team Chaotix and Cream's mother, Vanilla. All the while Eggman, feeling remorse for blowing up half the moon, decides to repair the half that broke, turning it into the Egg Moon. After this, the humans on Earth begin to trust Eggman a little more. Later, due to a malfunction with the Egg Moon, the Earth seemed to be stuck in an eternal eclipse. As a solution, Eggman invents sunshine balls to simulate sunlight for a household, which sells like hotcakes as people around the world rely on them. Sonic, however, thinks something fishy is going on and starts going around trashing the source of the sunshine ball's power. The public called for Sonic's arrest, asking why he was doing this. Sonic later shows that Eggman's true intentions were to brainwash the masses to do his bidding, which leads to the authorities and Sonic's gang teaming up together to put Eggman behind bars and clear Sonic's name once again. Favorite episode from the arc? Episode 39, Defective Detective / Chaotix Detective Agency. The episode follows up on the events of the Shadow Saga, with Chaos Control bringing more of Sonic's world onto Earth, with the Chaotix Detective Agency being one of the things brought over. They introduce themselves, except for Charming D, who is rudely interrupted by Espio, and take on a case brought to them by Vanilla, who Vector gladly accepts the case from. Meanwhile, Eggman offers to fix the moon he broke by turning it into the Egg Moon. The rest of the episode consists of the detectives attempting to break into the Thorndike mansion, as they consistently get stopped by Amy and Ella. They're later caught and accuse Sonic and his friends of kidnapping when Sonic comes to see the commotion. While everyone's fighting, Cream turns around to Vanilla, her mother, with tears in her eyes. They reunite, and Vanilla thanks Vector and the Chaotix for finding her daughter, as well as Sonic for looking after Cream since she's been in this world. Vector looks at Sonic, a little flustered for calling him a kidnapper earlier. And that's where the episode ends. Honestly, I like this episode because it solidifies the fact that if the Chaotix are involved in the episode, it'll 99% chance be a funny filler episode. The Chaotix are consistently funny in this episode, playing off their dynamics from the games as well as gaining some new connections, such as Vector and Vanilla, which will be much more prominent in later episodes. The comedy they bring to the series is some of the funniest things this show has to offer, and they never overstay their welcome in my opinion. They are the absolute highlight of this entire saga, to be honest. Also, this episode gave us the "I'm Sonic the Kidnapper" line in the dub. Hilarious stuff said. I have no clue why this was a whole separate saga whenever it was so short. In my opinion, this may have been the most forgettable part of Sonic X, just for the fact it didn't have as much action and stakes as the previous sagas had, and a lot of the comedy in it just kind of flops for me. It's also just so baffling that the humans so easily just trust Eggman and instantly turn on Sonic whenever he doubts what Eggman's doing. Like, why would they ever trust Eggman after all the atrocities he's committed throughout this entire series? And why would they all just turn on Sonic on a dime? They just did this in the SA2 adaptation. After all that Sonic has done to protect you from the very person you all are trusting, to just instantly turn on him for being suspicious of Eggman, which is perfectly reasonable? It's so insane, man. The best part about this saga was the Chaotix, easily. Whatever, this is the most forgettable part of Sonic X, man. This saga is very loosely an adaptation of Sonic Battle, starting with Eggman sending Bokoon to awaken Emerl, a battle robot created by Gerald Robotnik designed to copy abilities and use them instantaneously. Sonic later fights a tank that has Emerald inside that self-destructs as a distraction to get Eggman out of prison. Emerald later ends up at the Thorndike Mansion, being found by Cream and Cheese. Later, Eggman finds a way out of prison, and as a response, the president sets up a trap to lure him back into custody, with a fighting tournament with the Chaos Emerald up for grabs. The contestants consist of Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Rouge, Chris, Danny, Nelson, Chuck, Lucky, Emerl, Deco, Goku, Mr. Stewart, Sam Speed, Ella, Mr. Tanaka, the president himself, a Black Knight, and Goku. The final match shows Emerald defeating Knuckles, granting him the Chaos Emerald. This, however, awakens Emerald's old Eggman program, causing him to wreak havoc all over the stadium and the town. Cream and Cheese then decide to persuade Emerald to stop attacking. Emerald thinks for a second, but the Chaos Emerald's energy is too powerful to change his mind. Cream and Cheese attack him together. Emerald can't copy their abilities since he cannot focus on one target for long enough, resulting in Cream and Cheese being able to knock Emerald into the ocean to sink in short circuit. Cream and Cheese, after the fight, sob over the loss of a robot they thought could be their friend. Favorite episode? Episode 46, A Wild Wind / Sonic Battle Finale. This episode picks up where the previous one left off, finishing the tournament. The final battle is between Emerl and Knuckles. In the first few minutes, Knuckles overpowers Emerl, but Emerald counterattacks him using Sonic's spin attack, giving him a beating. Cream eventually decides to throw in the towel so Emerald would have to give up, but Knuckles forfeits the round before she does so. Emerl and Knuckles shake hands as the battle comes to an end, and Emerl is awarded a Chaos Emerald. But this comes with an unexpected twist. His programming overrides when given the Chaos Emerald, turning him into a war machine who destroys not just the stadium where the tournament is being held, but the entire city in his warpath. Sonic, Knuckles, Tails, Amy, and Rouge try to stop him, but since Emerl is capable of copying abilities, none of them can succeed in doing so. They lead him to a cliffside where Emerl knocks Sonic and Knuckles into the water, where they're saved by Cream and Cheese. Cream then attempts to convince Emerl to stand down and stop fighting, to no avail as he attempts to strike them down before Sonic steps in and takes the blow. This shocks Cream to the point where she has to fight off Emerl herself with Cheese, with them teaming up so Emerl cannot copy their abilities and fight them off. She lands the final blow, screaming Emerald's name as he's knocked into the ocean. In the last moments of Emerald's life, he reminisces about his moments with Cream and Cheese, and copies one last thing, Cream's tears. The episode ends with a shot of our heroes looking on as Cream and Cheese just sob over their fallen friend. This episode just absolutely tugs at your heartstrings, and I love it so much for that. It shows that this show can pull off these moments with these characters given the right time and writers to make these characters fleshed out and worth caring about. The first couple episodes of the saga, consisting of Eggman getting out of prison and all that, were pretty boring to me. I still don't understand why the humans would just let Eggman fix their appliances while in prison, when they know how dangerous he is with technology, but whatever, they're not the brightest bunch. But once the tournament section of the saga took place, that's when the fun really started. The comedy was on point, consistently got a chuckle out of me, the action was plentiful, and the character development and arc of Emerald are so good. He was silent, yet showed so much character growth being with Cream and Cheese to where when he turns back evil, you feel for Cream and Cheese. Taking the purest characters in the entire show and making them basically be forced to kill a robot to whom they grew so attached to makes you feel so heartbroken to where you may shed a few tears. Honestly, I did. And this was the Sonic X story that showed me that they could very well make emotional moments blend in with the usual comedy the series has. So overall, yeah, pretty good saga. After hearing about a missing gun battleship, Sonic and his friends set out to rescue the soldiers aboard, and they find themselves on the remnants of the lost continent of Marasia, where Dr. Eggman, being revealed to be the cause of the soldiers' disappearances, plans to trigger a volcanic eruption. With the gun troops joining them, Sonic and his team fight Eggman, but they are initially driven back. they eventually defeat his forces and land on Marasia. Eggman continues his search for the volcanic hotspot, while Sonic and his friends face and defeat native robots. They escape as the island sinks. Back in Station Square, Sonic and the others learn that their home planet and Earth, once one, are merging again, risking disruptions in time and space. Sonic's friends and everything brought to Earth needs to return to Sonic's planet, so Tails and Chuck build a chaos control machine to send everyone back. But Chris stops Sonic from leaving, unable to cope with losing him. Sonic and Chris escape together, and Chris confides in his fear of loneliness. Sonic reassures him that they'll meet again at some point. Back on Sonic's planet, Eggman sees Sonic's absence as a chance to take over, but ultimately faces Sonic's return. We get a glimpse into a future 6 years ahead, where Chris and his friends, now grown up, reminisce about their time spent with Sonic and his friends. The saga ends with Amy declaring to Sonic, with tears in her eyes, that she will wait for him to return home for as long as it takes. Amy pleads with Sonic to tell her that he loves her, and Sonic hands her a white flower and says something in an intentionally muted voice, and it causes Amy to hug and cry in Sonic's arms. Favorite episode? Episode 52. A New Start / Memories of the Wind. The episode opens with Eggman announcing his plan to rule the world, hoping to draw Sonic out. Sonic is still missing, causing concern for everyone, including Eggman. That night, Amy is at Cream's for a sleepover. Cream urges Amy to stay with them, now that Sonic is gone, but Amy declines. When Eggman's fortress flies by, Amy attacks it with her hammer. Despite Eggman's taunts about Sonic, Amy's anger grows, and she continues her assault. Meanwhile, Knuckles and Rouge argue about Sonic's delay, which turns into a fight between them. Eggman is then confronted by Tails and the Tornado 2, who is irritated that he's been woken up by Eggman's loud speeches. Another of Amy's hammers hit Eggman's fortress as he tries to evade Tails. And just as Eggman fires a barrage of missiles, Tails is forced to use the Tornado's new Hyper Tornado Jet mode, designed by Chuck, but Eggman's ship remains unaffected by Tails' offensive. Just as Eggman's missiles are about to hit the tornado, Super Sonic arrives, destroys it, and confronts Eggman, ultimately blowing up the fortress. Tails is relieved to have Sonic back. Knuckles and Rouge, after their fight, see Sonic flying in the sky and react with mixed emotions. At Cream's house, Amy spots Super Sonic, runs to him, and finds him at her house. Overwhelmed, Amy cries and expresses her fear of never seeing him again. Sonic, while kneeling, hands her a flower and promises to never leave her again, causing Amy to cry tears of joy as they embrace. 6 years later in the human world, a teenage Chris is working on the Chaos Control Portal. Helen arrives and they head to the meeting place in a specially designed car. Danny wants to be the first person to go through the portal, but Chris is still perfecting Chaos Control. Reflecting on past events with Sonic, Chris tears up as Sonic uses Chaos Control to depart. This episode perfectly finished off Sonic X's story for me, having all the comedy, wholesomeness, and emotions that were in the show's best moments, all culminating in a really well done finale at the time. The Sonic and Amy scene especially hit me in the feels. While I'm not the biggest shipper in the world, it was a really cute moment between the two, with the implication of Sonic actually reciprocating Amy's feelings being a heartwarming and unexpected moment. And with Chris now properly grown up, I don't feel as bad for him as I did in the last few episodes, which I'll talk about here shortly. Overall, this saga is pretty forgettable besides the ending for both good and bad reasons. While the parts where Sonic and friends go through the portal and say goodbye to all the humans can be bittersweet and downright emotional at some points, it is at this point where I have my gripes about Chris Thorndyke. Throughout the entire series, he's been built up by Chuck, Mr. Stewart, and even Eggman to have a character arc. But with that development being to learn to let Sonic go when his time on this planet is over. And in that moment, it seemed like it was going to be pulled off, but no! He just goes and closes the portal with no guarantees that it'll ever open again. while also knowing the dangers of keeping him on their planet, and just runs off and takes Sonic for himself. To his defense, if any kid his age would be in his shoes, I personally wouldn't want Sonic to ever leave my life. But the fact that he's had this character development ever since the Chaos Emerald saga, like in the first 10 couple episodes of this series, and it was just about to pay off. And for it to just completely 180 just for another episode or two, just makes me so mad at Chris as a character. This, along with the usual plot holes and dumb stuff the show loves to pull, makes this section of Sonic X my least favorite saga in all honesty. Now, originally, this is how Sonic X would have ended, until the crew was commissioned to do another set of 25 episodes to tell one final story with these characters. And that would be the story of the Metarex saga. This saga is the longest this show has, so I'll try my best to summarize it very briefly. In Sonic's world, a new girl named Cosmo arrives seeking the legendary one who can harness the Chaos Emeralds. After an unknown enemy nearly defeats Sonic in space, Sonic scatters the emeralds across the universe to prevent this foe from using their power. Back on Earth, Chris travels to Sonic's world through a dimensional portal, and he finds that he's regressed to his younger self, as only 6 months have passed for Sonic. This new enemy is shown to be Dark Oak, and his Metarex army attacks Sonic's planet, stealing the planet egg and threatening the world's plant life. Using Chris's newfound knowledge, he and Tails create the Blue Typhoon to travel across the universe to retrieve the Chaos Emeralds and stop Dark Oak. This saga draws from Sonic Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog, with elements like Shadow's amnesia and the Metarex resembling the Black Arms. After a dangerous encounter with Dark Oak, after Sonic and friends defeated the other Metarex bosses, Cosmo's dark secret is revealed. She was an unwilling Metarex spy, part of a plant race that needs planet egg energy to survive. To stop the Metarex's universe-destroying plan, Cosmo sacrifices herself with the help of Super Sonic and Super Shadow. Tails, who has fallen for Cosmo throughout their time spent together, must kill her to release her power, defeating Dark Oak and restoring him to his benevolent form. Her essence becomes a seed that Tails later plants. With the Metarex defeated, Eggman sends Chris home, then renews his rivalry with Sonic, but in a more lighthearted manner. Favorite episode? Episode 68, A Revolutionary Tale / On a Destroyed Planet, and Episode 77, A Fearless Friend / What I Can Do For You. Yeah, with this saga, I had to pick 2 episodes, because one of them is the climax of the saga, while the other is a good episode for a specific character, Shadow the Hedgehog. We'll start with that one. Episode 68 starts with Rouge manipulating Bokun with his pennant to serve her orange juice while she showers. Meanwhile, Dr. Eggman's forces face a human group battling the Metarex Armada. Getting caught in the crossfire as well, Eggman sends Shadow to help them out. Shadow destroys the Metarex battleships and saves Molly's ship, causing the Metarex to retreat. Molly thanks Eggman and invites them to their planet Cascade to celebrate their heroic deeds. On their way to Cascade, Molly explains the planet's plight and their efforts to restore it. Eggman orders Shadow to retrieve the Chaos Emerald from the planet without Rouge's interference, but Shadow is distracted by her. Later, Shadow reminisces about past battles with the Metarex until Molly's questions interrupt him. Despite his dismissive attitude, Molly respects him and compares him to the Black Wind, a legend in their culture which he rejects. Eggman, while receiving honors for his assistance, faces criticism when he announces he must leave. Molly calms the situation and asks Leon, another soldier, about the Chaos Emerald. He reveals a stone had been found recently and was being stored in their laboratory. He also asks Molly to find a disc, which turns out to be rigged with dynamite. Shadow saves Molly and Rouge with chaos control and wonders why Leon tried to kill them. Afterwards, Metarex vessels arrive, and Shadow's call for Eggman fails. Leon plans to hand Eggman over to the Metarex in exchange for sparing his planet's survivors. Leon tries to detain Eggman but fails, and Eggman escapes with Deku and Boku. Molly, despite warnings, returns to base and Shadow joins the fight. The Metarex fleet arrives but abandons Leon and his team since Eggman is still alive. Molly, heartbroken and betrayed, tries to rally her friends, but is rejected by her army's pessimistic view of this unwinnable battle. Shadow attempts to comfort her before she rushes to the flagship, ultimately leading to Molly's death. Shadow, seeing this, removes his limiters and destroys the Metarex fleet as Rouge watches from afar. In the end, Shadow and Rouge stand before Molly's grave, with Shadow saying she wasn't clinging on to the past. She wanted to live to see the future. Shadow gives Rouge the Chaos Emerald, entrusting her to give it to Eggman, and walks away to fulfill Molly's dream, to protect what's important to them. Despite the damage caused, Pale Bayleaf survives and contacts Eggman, leaving the episode off on a cliffhanger. This episode basically gives Shadow his character arc from both Heroes and Shadow 05, with him learning not to cling to the past, but rather live and fight for a better future, which is so awesome. I especially love the use of music from the games, being Fakery Way for Twinkle Park from Sonic Adventure, and Event Reflection from Sonic Adventure 2, giving the moments in this episode a lot more weight to me. This is something this saga does a lot, and it only adds to the atmosphere of the whole thing. And now, for the climax of the Metarex saga, episode 77. I can't describe it any better than the Sonic Wikizone did, so I'll be reading directly from their summary of the plot. As the giant Metarex seed, Final Mova, finally reaches the final stage of its metamorphosis, its energy levels start to rise rapidly, while everyone watches in confusion. Trying to stop Final Mova, Shadow charges towards the giant Metarex seed to destroy it. Sonic also has Chris deploy the Ring Tunnel, which Sonic uses to launch a spin attack at Final Mova. Final Mova, however, resists Sonic's attack, and releases black energy from its holes, knocking Sonic and his crew back. Shadow tries to counterattack with his Chaos Spears, but it is a futile effort. In the end, the entire group crashes back on the Blue Typhoon. Back inside the Blue Typhoon, the Chaotix have recovered the drained Chaos Emeralds, and the crew are now trying to think of what to do without extra power. Out of nowhere, Eggman reveals that they may be able to restore the Chaos Emerald's power if they transfer their ship's remaining energies into them. Suddenly, however, Final Mova begins to emit energy waves that drain the energies from animals and robots across the galaxy, while causing plants on various planets to grow at abnormal rates. If this were to continue, all animal life in the galaxy would perish. The only one unaffected by the waves is Cosmo, since she and the Metarex come from the same race. As such, she sets off with the Chaos Emeralds in hand to bring them to Eggman so he can restore their power. Along the way, Cosmo communicates with Dark Oak telepathically, telling him that she and her friends will never give up fighting for peace. In retaliation, Dark Oak has the vines on the ship attack to try to kill Cosmo. Stuck in the vines, she loses the Chaos Emeralds and they drop into space. As Sonic and Shadow try to react, the planet eggs inside Final Mova respond to the Chaos Emeralds, causing them to emit energies that not only cease Final Mova's life-draining energy waves, but also restore the Chaos Emeralds. As the Chaos Emeralds float down towards the Blue Typhoon, both Sonic and Shadow, who put their differences aside, use them to transform into Super Sonic and Super Shadow. They then fly towards Final Mova, tearing its seed form apart at different spots at incredible speed. This results in Final Mova breaking apart and emitting a large blinding light. Final Mova, however, was not destroyed. Instead, it has shed its crust and transformed into a black planet. Realizing that the Metarex's plot to rule the galaxy has been foiled, Dark Oak begins his plan to destroy the universe as revenge by compressing Final Mova's energy, creating a powerful gravitational field that expands into space. As everyone watches the event unfold, Chris explains Dark Oak's plan. Like how a balloon will pop if squeezed too hard, Dark Oak plans to crush his final MOBA form until it explodes, causing an explosion powerful enough to wipe out the universe. Super Sonic and Super Shadow launch themselves at Final MOBA, but are unable to break through its gravitational field. Meanwhile, on board the Crimson Egg, Eggman acknowledges that he has built a self-destruction system in Deco and Boku, and plans to use it to break into the field. However, he admitted later that it was useless anyway. Meanwhile, Shadow tries to remove his limiters to gain enough power to break through the gravitational field, but Sonic convinces him that it's not the right time for that. Instead, Sonic orders the team inside the Blue Typhoon to use the Sonic Power Cannon to launch him at Final MOBA. Tails and the other hesitate to follow the plan, as it puts both Sonic and the cannon at risk if they use the cannon while Sonic is in super form. Sonic, however, insists that it is the only way they can win. Forced to do so, the crew prepares the cannon for Sonic, channeling all the remaining energy on ship to the cannon. Watching the Blue Typhoon, Cosmo feels helpless, but her mother, Earthia, in mind, assures her that she is the one destined to save the galaxy. It is then that Cosmo's red amulet breaks, and she transforms into a new form, now filled with determination to stop the Metarex's threat once and for all. With her new powers, Cosmo flies to Final MOBA, passing through and dissipating the gravitational force field, and plants herself on top of it, becoming a tree. Contacting her friends telepathically, Cosmo says that she is now immobilized Dark Oak. She then tells Tails to load the Sonic Power Cannon and fire it at Final MOBA. Initially, everyone is shocked and cannot come to a final decision whether or not to risk saving the universe if they're going to kill Cosmo in the process. Especially Tails, who orders them all to leave to prepare for the situation. Having made up his mind, Sonic flies into the Sonic Power Cannon to prepare the shot. No sooner, Super Shadow enters the cannon to help Sonic. Sonic welcomes the behavior with a brief smile, which Shadow returned, and they start charging the Sonic Power Cannon with their spin attacks, much to everyone's shock. Tails, however, is very hesitant to sacrifice Cosmo, but Dr. Eggman reassures Tails about the destiny the planet species had placed in Cosmo, to save the universe from the Metarex, and bring her clan back as the seeds from her tree will spread throughout the galaxy. He then thinks back to all the strong memories he's had during their intergalactic adventure. Finally, Tails comes to terms with his feelings, and after saying a calm goodbye, he presses the Sonic Power Cannon's ignition button, and fires Super Sonic and Super Shadow at Final MOBA, completely destroying it, including Cosmo, much to everyone's sadness. In the original dub, after the planet explodes, Cosmo and Tails see each other again, before parting ways, saying that they had fun together, and they'll never forget each other, which ends when Cosmo disappears into the light, saying that she loves Tails no matter what. This episode just speaks for itself. A climactic ending to one of the best Sonic stories, period. This is the absolute best that Sonic X has to offer. The experience of watching the events of this massive story unfold for yourself is something truly special. I can confidently say that the overarching story told in the Metarex saga of Sonic X rivals even some of the best stories ever told in this series. It has stakes, comedy, cool fights, amazing character moments, and more than anything, this whole story has a deeper meaning that can be applied to our everyday lives as outside viewers. Some of the best Sonic stories, in my opinion, can be taken at face value, but for those who are invested and pay close attention to what's being told, you can piece together a message being told to both the characters and the viewers experiencing these events with the characters. An easy example is Sonic and the Black Knight story. At face value, you can describe the story as Sonic helping out Merlina by defeating a corrupted King Arthur, but if you dig deeper and pay attention, Sonic isn't doing this because it's the right thing to do, but because he's doing whatever it takes to help out anyone in need, regardless of if he has to play the bad guy or not. Through that journey, we find out Merlina's true intent is to create a world that'll never grow old and live forever. similar to what the Metarex and Dark Oak were planning to do themselves in the Metarex Saga. But in a world that never ends and is always peaceful, no one can truly be free and run as they please. So in Black Knight's case, Sonic takes down Merlina and explains that every world will have its end. And while it's sad to think about, that's more of a reason to appreciate and live in the time that we have left. In the Metarex Saga, despite being told, he fights for a world riddled with violence and destruction, and eventually, his methods will cause the end of the universe as a whole. He still holds out hope for the future with his freedom and 2 feet constantly moving on the ground. He's got friends waiting for him to go home with him. And that's not even scratching the surface of what's being told behind the adventure, which would take a whole video in itself to explain. Which is basically what Chalmix did. Check it out, it's a great video explaining the ins and outs of this entire saga. But all this to say, while Sonic X is in many ways flawed, like its storytelling in some spots, its art and animation, quality, pacing, and in many other ways, that doesn't mean it isn't worth your time. Even this saga, for as much as I've blazed it and praised it, has problems too. Like Chris coming back to Sonic's world for little to no reason. He's a way better character here just for the fact he isn't a kid with abandonment issues anymore, but it makes his whole character arc from episode 51 completely meaningless. And as the writer said in the Homebound saga, Chris being there poses a threat to both his and Sonic's world, but whatever. Regardless, for a supplementary show to go alongside the main video games, Sonic X offers both comedic premises as well as serious, and at some points, heart-wrenching stories, with lessons and outlooks on life that can be carried into our own lives. Overall, Sonic X, while being a mess of a show at times, reminded me of the things I loved the most when it comes to the entire Sonic series. Seems like a reflection of the Sonic franchise as a whole, doesn't it? But regardless, if I can say anything with certainty, it's that, again, any part of this show is worth going out of your way to watch. It's Season 3. Any other part of the show, while it can be fun, emotional, or anything else, wasn't very memorable to me all this time after watching it. And please watch it in the original Japanese format, since 4Kids edited everything so much that it loses so much of its impact. And a quick fun fact, the main writer for Season 3, Kyoko Yoshimura, sorry if I mispronounced that name or anything, actually went on to write the story for Sonic Unleashed, which nowadays is praised as one of the best Sonic stories as well. And after all of this, you may ask, is Sonic X still good? And after watching the entire series subtitled, my answer to that is
yes and no.
Its highest points are some of the largest peaks the series has ever had in its stories, while its lowest points are either forgettable or just downright bad. But overall, I had a fun time going through the show, whether it was to actually get myself invested in the stories being told, or just for something to put on while doing something else. Watching this show again made me feel like that same kid again, eagerly waiting to see what shenanigans Sonic and friends get up to next. And that's something I have to give it credit for. Does that mean I'm blinded by my nostalgia for the show? Perhaps, but I don't feel like my time was wasted. And that'll do it for my thoughts on Sonic X. If you've made it this far in, I thank you immensely for watching. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe, hit that bell. You already know the deal. But before I sign off, let me know your opinions on the series in the comments, since you've already heard all of mine. I'd love to see what this little show means to you. But alright, that's enough from me. Thank you all again, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Good night, have a sweet dream.